And I'm going to ask everyone to stand. We'll have an invocation and pledge of allegiance. And we bow in an attitude of prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, we say thank you for this wonderful day, a beautiful day in Washington County. We ask for your guidance and direction as we contemplate, deliberate, and collaboratively work together. Lord, as we're at the state of the city this morning, we pray for our peers and comrades at the city and many of the staff that, Lord, we heard this morning about working together, serving together, serving the citizens of our community. Lead, guide, and direct us, we pray in thy precious name. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, again, good morning. We'll go ahead and call our meeting March 7th, 2023 to order. With that, no minutes this morning to approve. Okay, we'll move right into commissioners' reports and comments. And Mr. Wagner's looking at me, so.
Well, you usually put me on the spot, John. I was trying to get prepared for it. Actually, believe it or not, I have not a whole lot to talk about this morning, but I did want to welcome American Red Cross. Thank you. Washington County Public Schools and school board members, thank you. And staff for being here. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kiefer?
Yes, welcome everyone. I just have one comment. Some employees have reached out to me in the last day. Excuse me, I'm battling a sinus congestion here. Regarding the work from home policy, they've been instructed to come back to work. This was something that we voted on in open session. I think it might be nice if we have another conversation about that in open session, just if that's the intent, so be it. But employees, I guess, are getting the sense that maybe something was done wrong, and I just, from my perspective, don't see that as the case. So if we could, since we voted on that policy in open session, to implement it, I think we should vote on it in open session to do away with it, if that, be the board's desire. So that's my only comment.
Okay.
Want me to comment on that? I mean,
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to.
yeah, I'll just say, Commissioner Kiefer had reached out to me last night. Yeah, the remote work policy, the county is required to have a remote work policy. So there will be some revisions that will be coming to the board for the remote work policy to be able to use in emergency situations and other unique situations. So those revisions will be coming to the board in the next few weeks, so that will be presented and discussed in an open meeting. Yeah, I thought I was instructed to send out an email to the staff notifying them that with the transition period beginning April 3rd, that there will be discontinuing remote work. So that was the instruction. I think from an operational standpoint to me, that was communicated to the staff. So if the board wants to take a formal vote on that to discontinue remote work effective April 3rd, obviously you're free to do that. Or have further discussions, as Wayne said. So
I think I'd prefer to wait to review keep it as the email stated and wait to further review your remote work policy, because we haven't seen that yet, right?
that's correct. So it'll be, because as again, we're required to have a remote work policy. So that policy will, the new provisions we'll talk about, it'll be able to be used in an emergency situation or in a unique or an unusual situation at the discretion of the county administrator. That will be the revisions that will be brought to the board sometime in the next few weeks. So that'll have to, so as Commissioner Kiefer said, that policy was voted on because it's a commissioner policy. So any revisions to that policy would have to be reviewed and approved by the Board of County Commissioners. So that will be brought to you.
So the intent is,
but it has been communicated as per the direction of this board to the staff by email yesterday.
That's fine. I feel if we had a change in policy, that's something that I was anticipating it to be on this week's agenda. That was just my assumption, unfortunately. But anytime we've had a change in policy, we've tended to vote on it And I'm just disappointed. I know when we originally voted on that policy, we asked for, I believe it was a 90-day review, and we didn't get that 90-day review.
Well, there were a lot of reasons for that.
but-
There were a lot of reasons for that we've explained to the board. So,
But I think we could have had a 90-day review. We had plenty of meetings in that time frame that it could have been added as an
if
agenda
you look at the
item.
schedule, it's not exactly that easy, but
It didn't have to be exactly 90 days, but we could have had an agenda item. I think it would have been in August, September timeframe.
well, we had a lot of things going on that time, and the board's well aware of all those.
So we want to put it on the,
I don't want it on the agenda till it comes back with his recommendations
okay.
to.
So just to make clear, are you all aware? So there was an email sent out. I sent out an email yesterday notifying the staff. So unless the board wants to do something different,
I'm fine with it. Okay. Mr. Harvey?
Thank you, President Barr. Jeff Klein and I went out to Fair Play on Saturday night and participated in their annual banquet dinner and awards, and it was really good to, meet the people there, but also to recognize the many volunteers that put in hundreds and hundreds of hours every year, and with some of the individuals, responding to 230 or more incidents a year. And then the volunteers in the auxiliary, some of them putting 600-700 hours a year to help raise money and support the volunteer programs here that are really important across the whole county. So we've been doing that for a number of weeks now. The commissioners to visit and acknowledge those people that have done so much. So again, great work by the folks in Fair Play. I just want to make a couple of very brief comments about the budget process we're going through right now. And we have the school board today. Last week we met with the library system, and Michelle Gordon has laid out the operational budget and the capital budget. And one of the things as a new commissioner that strikes me is the significant demands and requirements on the county, some of which we don't have any control over because, we support county health or the county library system that are not, directly under our charge as far as being able to set policy, et cetera. But the requirements to maintain our school system we're going to hear about today is pretty significant. We need to renovate or modernize or relocate the courthouse. There's ongoing demands from libraries, systems, roads, bridges, parks and recreation, land conservation. I mean, the demands far exceed the budget that we have, the resources that we bring in. And, in looking back on it, I just would have liked us to have had the disparity grants that we could have been receiving the last couple of years of $4 to $5 million a year. Plus the tax revenue that we could have had from our taxpayers that, did not give any of them, I think, a meaningful reduction. And we're not at the federal level where our tax cuts have macroeconomic impact to generate increasing revenues across the economy. So I think, we're probably in the hole $14 million or more. That would have been nice to have had to meet some of our real needs. And I anticipate that, we're probably going to lose $14 million, over the next 2 years of income that is in real, we could really use it to support some of the initiatives that we have, that we talk about each of these budget sessions. And then Michelle Gordon laid out the prospect that there might be a need in, I think, 25, 26, 27 budget years for additional revenue. We have a tough job ahead of us here to balance these requirements. We have far more requests than we have assets to put to those. And so we're going to have a tough job. I know the school board is asking for a modest increase from their perspective. I'm looking forward to hearing about it. We have some significant interest to make sure certain things are achieved there, at least I do, and I look forward to hearing from the school board and others today. But we have a tough road ahead, and we have some tough decisions to make, so thank you.
Mr. Harvey. Mr. Klein?
Thank you. I too also Commissioner Harvey mentioned, attended the Fair Play Fire Company banquet. They did recognize and thank the commissioners for our support over the last year or so with the additional funding that allows them to keep up with the ever-expanding amount of call loads that they're having. I do want to thank all the staff who participated in the home show at the Arc at HCC. We even had Bob the Builder out there walking around, and that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Klein. Again, it's Maryland State Legislature session, 90 days. Every Wednesday, fortunately, we don't have to so much go to Annapolis anymore. We can do it by Zoom or Teams. And, but pretty much every Wednesday is consumed with the MACO legislative agenda items, and very much involved with tracking the major bills. A lot of discussion with amendments, and some of the bills are just flat out being non-supported, and so it's very active right now with Maryland Association of Counties, and we look forward to furthering those discussions pretty much every Wednesday. So for me, that's kind of the highlight of the week, and keeping track of what's going on. So hats off to our local delegation. I know they have their hands full. They're trying to figure out the new administration in Annapolis and where they fit, and some of the things that they're dealing with. So keep them in our thoughts and prayers. Any other comments from my fellow commissioners?
Yeah, just the only thing I want to bring up, there was a bond bill submitted for Hancock for $450,000. It was initiated by the delegation, not the commissioners. The language made it look like we were supporting that renovation, just to make that clear. Not that we wouldn't or would not support it, but it was written incorrectly that the delegation, they actually initiated that, not the commissioners. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move into staff comments, and first up is our own Leslie Hart. Good morning, Leslie.
Good morning. Leslie Hart, Washington County Department of Business Development. I believe you all have received this already on your desks. It came out on Friday. This is the newest edition of the 2023 Grown Local magazine. This is an all-agricultural publication, and this goes out to about 12,000 residents in Washington, Frederick, and Franklin counties. I just want to share with you that we had about a 35% increase in advertisers from 2022 to 2023, which shows the successful impact and interest in this magazine. I have placed, these will be in our lobby, and I'll put them out to all of the departments that have public attendance to them, so that that's available in those locations. There are also 65 additional locations out across our community that these are available to pick up. So I just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to see it, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Scott Hobbs. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning, Scott Hobbs, Director of Engineering. I'm requesting to advertise the Chief of Surveys position, and the position would be posted at grade 15.
And that's a vacancy created by who, Scott?
Garrett Culler was in the position. It's a vacant budgeted position.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, ready to vote? All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, Michelle.
Michelle Preby, Assistant to the County Administrator. I'm here on behalf of the Washington County Gaming Commission. They request that you reach a consensus to reappoint Matthew Schnebley to a first full 2-year term through September 30th, 2024, and to reappoint Deborah Reeser to a first full 2-year term through February 28th, 2025. This is not a paid board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second to approve as submitted. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you, gentlemen. Anyone?
I'm also here on behalf of the Area Agency on Aging Advisory Council to request that you reach the consensus to appoint Kathy Harple to serve a first three-year term from February 1, 2023 through January 31st, 2026. To also appoint Dawn Nally to serve a first three-year term from February 1st, 2023 through January 31st, 2026. And to also reappoint Harry Wagaman to serve a second three-year term from February 1, 2022 through January 31st, 2025. To reappoint Vernell Doyle to serve a second three-year term from January 1, 2023 through December 31st, 2026. And to reappoint Susan Taylor to serve a first full three-year term from February 1, 2022 through January 31st, 2025. And this is not a paid board.
Looking for a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion second to approve as submitted. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Very good. John Martirano.
Thank you, President Park. Good morning, Commissioners. Just a few things. Commissioners received a letter from Andy Smith, the president of Brothers United Who Dare to Care, seeking a letter of support from the Board of County Commissioners. They are seeking to acquire and prepare property to house their Youth News Corps internship program and their Neighborhood Youth Club mentorship program. So they're submitting applications to Congressman Trone, U.S. Senators Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen, and he's asking for commissioners to provide a letter of support for that project. So I'll present that to you for your consideration this morning.
There was no financial request,
There was
correct?
not, just a letter of support.
They're seeking federal funds.
Motion to support.
Second.
Okay, motion is second to support as mentioned. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
And also, it was mentioned, I did want to thank county staff for being out at the home show all weekend, Saturday and Sunday. I didn't make it out on Saturday, but there were a number of county staff out there on Saturday. I saw a lot of pictures, including Bob the Builder, but a lot of our permits, water quality, and engineering construction people were out there. I did make it out on Sunday, and we had people manning the booth and answering questions there as well. And those are long days, but I do appreciate them being out and being there at the home show and talking to the citizens and trying to answer their questions. And the last thing is, the next county commissioner meeting is the 21st.
Okay,
That's all I have.
thank you. County Attorney Kurt Downey?
Nothing this morning.
Nothing?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll move right into citizens' participation. We have any citizens here this morning that would like to bring things to our attention? Yes, you want to come on up to the table and please give us your name and address for the records.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muller. My name is Rick Hawkinsmith. I'm a Washington County resident. I live 9808 Wandering Lane, over near the Palmyra Dairy Farm. That suffices. I appreciate the opportunity this morning. I really appreciate speaking with Michelle, got your last name on the phone Friday. First time I've ever been here. I have a handout for 7. Michelle, would you like to bring it to you and pass it around? Sure.
It's okay.
We'll be fine.
That's another one I don't.
Yeah, we'll be all right. Yeah, no.
I have a cover letter, and there are some enclosures. I won't get into the enclosures. I will read the letter that I wrote for today. The Washington County Code of the Public Local Laws, 2019 edition, Subtitle 10, Regulation of Noise, so on and so forth. In general, subject to Section 3105, the environmental article, the annotated Code of Maryland, and subsection of the section, the county commissioners, by ordinance, may adopt environmental noise standards, sound level limits, and noise controls as necessary to protect the public health, the general welfare, and property. The gentleman You have the opportunity to protect the citizens of Washington County from noise pollution. Noise is an increasingly contentious quality of life issue in our county. Washington County has long been known as a region where peace and quiet prevails in our communities. Noise-related, our communities, neighborhoods, and our homes. Noise-related issues with ATVs, all-terrain vehicles, dirt bikes, and modified muffler systems are currently being reviewed by the Maryland legislature. Well, you all seen the front page of news. Former Commissioner Weibel and now Delegate Weibel, front page of news. Several Maryland counties have noise regulations in place, Montgomery County being one. The city of Hagerstown has a noise ordinance. That's all in the enclosure and on the ordinance number. Noise is proven to be damaging to people. Stress, mental health, and physical health may result from exposure to acute and chronic noise. So I'm asking the commissioners to please take action to adopt a noise ordinance as authorized by the code that I've already talked about. I was born and raised in Washington County. My late father was Jack Hawkinsmith. I know Commissioner Barr is very familiar with the Hawkinsmith family. Little League Baseball, my brother Denny, my late father. I was away from Washington County since the age of 18, came back in 1996 with 6 sons and my wife. And as I said, I live across from Palmyra Dairy Farm. I have a beautiful view of Ralph Shank's farm. Noise is a problem in my community. The late Commissioner John Shank, when I moved into Rocky Glen, he was the developer. We had covenants. We did not have a homeowners association. Wandering Lane has now become a dirt bike ATV road. We used to have the motocross out where Edgewood Drive and Howell Road. Now we're having a warehouse built there. Won't get into the warehouse issues. That's a lot of open space. We have the drag strip. We have the speedway. The dirt bike noise, ATV, other issues. Private citizens, private property. People like me, people like you, have no means of recourse to have noise addressed in any way. We can file a complaint. I went to court on a peace order against some folks who were riding ATVs on public ground in a storm drainage pond on Wandering Lane. Not supposed to do that. I met Mr. Hobbs here this morning, engineering. Not supposed to ride around in storm. Noise, excessive noise. It's a real problem. I have a son, 26 years old, with a mental health issue, schizophrenia. These dirt bikes, this noise affects him. My wife is afraid to go outside due to some of these ATV riders threatening her. My wife is Asian American. There's other issues involved, but the biggest one is noise. So I know I got 3 minutes. I'm probably near the end of that. So I'm asking the county commissioners, you have, it already's there. It says you can authorize it. So please do something. Act on this. Give us the tools. I'll close. I went to court on a peace order. The judge actually told me, if you can't put up with it, move. A judge said that to me. I have no other recourse except for you folks to protect the citizens of Washington County. I do thank you for your time. I look forward to hopefully seeing you again. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hawkinsmith. Anyone, citizens participation? Okay, hearing none, we'll move into our agenda item, Proclamation for American Red Cross Month. And I'm going to ask Stacy McFarland, Executive Director of our local Red Cross, and I see a couple others standing. I'm sure you have some board members with you.
I'd like to take a moment to introduce our volunteers that we have here today. I'm Stacy McFarland. I'm Executive Director. Along with Jesse Hott, our Disaster Program Manager, we are one of 3 paid staff for 11 counties, which includes Washington County, Maryland. So we rely heavily on our volunteers. We are a volunteer-led organization. And to that effort, Joe Nico is here. He is our board chair of the Greater Shenandoah Valley chapter, and Al Martin is also here. He is on our board and has been affiliated with the Red Cross, correct me, 1976?
76, 77. It's the first nonprofit I joined after I got out of college and started working here with Smith Elliott before I was at the city. And I've been a volunteer for close to 50 years now. It's a great organization.
These are all volunteers that make the mission possible within Washington County. Will you hear me for just a few moments to tell you the impact we make here locally? Thank you so much. And by a few moments, I think I'll take less than 1 minute. The Red Cross, our core mission is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of the volunteers and the generosity of our donors. We work to make sure that all people are affected by disaster receive shelter, care, and hope in our communities. We make sure they are prepared for disasters, and that's what our disaster program team does, both respond and help prepare. We make sure that everyone in our county and in our chapter has access to safe, life-saving blood products. We work with our armed services and their families to support and provide comfort where needed. And we always make sure that individuals have the skills for CPR, AED. Unfortunately, many of us watched a heart attack on primetime TV with the NFL. And we are very proud to say that the trainers who responded were CPR certified by the American Red Cross. And we offer those classes right here in town, and we offer them regularly at our facility on Conrad Court here in Washington County. In the last 2022, we installed nearly 240 smoke detectors, making 88 homes safer, 74 blood drives, collected nearly 2,100 units, and we do work with Meritus Hospital. We trained nearly 800 people and supported nearly 300 service the armed forces just within Washington County, Maryland last year. So I just want to say thank you for recognizing the work of the American Red Cross in our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is my pleasure, if we'll come up to the flags, to present a proclamation from the county to the American Red Cross, Red Cross Month.
I'd like to have my volunteers up here as well.
This is a special honor for me to make this presentation today. As my family over the years have been very much involved with Red Cross, and my sister, Julie Barr Strasburg, I think, Al, correct me if I'm wrong, but was executive director for 29 years.
I was going to say 30, John. She was been involved ever since I've been a volunteer.
If she's listening today, we'll go with your count. But on behalf of my fellow county commissioners, this proclamation is for American Red Cross Month, March 2023. Whereas during American Red Cross in March, we celebrate the humanitarian spirit of Washington County, Maryland, and reaffirm our commitment to help ensure no one faces a crisis alone. And whereas caring for one another is at the heart of our community and exemplified by the people of Washington County, whose simple acts of kindness through the Red Cross provide help and hope in people's most difficult moments. Continuing the life-saving legacy of Clara Barton, who founded the organization more than 140 years ago to prevent and alleviate human suffering. And whereas every day these ordinary individuals lead a helping hand to make an extraordinary difference for neighbors in need. Their support, volunteerism, and generous donations are critical to our community's resiliency. We hereby recognize this month of March in honor of all those who fulfill Clara Barton's noble words, "You must never think of anything except the need and how to meet it," and asked everyone to join this commitment. Excuse me. Now, therefore, we, the Board of County Commissioners of Washington County, do hereby recognize the month of March as American Red Cross Month. We encourage all Let me say that again. We encourage all citizens of Washington County to reach out and support its humanitarian mission, awarded this 7th day of March, 2023.
Ready, 1, 2, 3.
Thanks for all our volunteers. Thanks.
Oh, wait, can we do a picture with all of them? Oh, that's okay. Okay.
Let's see, almost 50, 47 or 48. Interesting story on how I got involved, and I'll tell you that sometime.
Probably gonna need some of this.
Yeah.
Very good there. Katie, we tight enough?
There you go, that's great. Okay, here we go.
Harry, do you need us in time?
No, you're great. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Next item is presentation and discussion of the Board of Education's draft 2024 general fund budget for the Washington County Public School System. Good morning. Good morning. Steen, how are you this morning?
President Barr, President Klein, and County Commissioners. I'm Dave Savine, Superintendent of Washington County Public Schools, and I'm pleased to be joined by, to my side here, President Melissa Williams, as well as our Board Vice President, Stan Stauffer, and other board members. At this time, before I start my oral presentation of the board's adopted budget, I'd like to yield the floor to our Board President Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Savine. Good morning, President Barr, Vice President Klein, Commissioners Marano, Mr. Downey. Dr. Savine is here to present the board's draft budget. And what I'd like you to know, as part of the process, the board met in a work session, and on February 7th, we adopted the superintendent's recommended draft budget unanimously as our Board of Education draft budget. Later today, during a business meeting, we will have a recess and we will convene a public hearing, at which time the public will be able to comment on our budget. And then following that hearing, we will reconvene the business meeting. We expect later in March to finalize our budget. So at this time, I'll turn things over to Dr. Savine for the presentation of the board's fiscal year 2024 draft budget. Dr. Savine.
Thank you, President Williams, and again, President Barr, members of the Board of Commissioners, and certainly Mr. Martirano. Dave Savine, Superintendent of Schools. It's a pleasure to be with you. Appreciate this opportunity to present the Board of Education's budget. Certainly hard to believe that 8 months passed since I started serving as the superintendent of Washington County Public Schools. I'm a proud member of this community and a resident of Washington County. As I began my work this past summer, it was clear that our school community has a considerable number of strengths. Pride in our schools, communities that come together to support one another, and staff who are incredibly passionate and professional and highly devoted to seeing our students succeed. This community, as a part of the superintendent selection process, also shared with me the challenges faced by Washington County. I'm a firm believer that opportunities exist with challenges. I have really enjoyed being welcomed by Washington County residents, and I greatly appreciate the feedback and the thoughts I've received from staff, parents, commissioners, stakeholders, and most importantly, our students. I hear you, and I've had my own personal experiences as I've visited schools and attended many community events. I considered this feedback in creating the superintendent's recommended fiscal year 2024 budget, which is now, as you heard, has been adopted by our Board of Education. I'm confident that you will see that the Board of Education is presenting a fiscally responsible financial plan that keeps Washington County Public Schools moving forward. Be assured, this is not a wish list of items, only critical needs. We must at least meet these needs for the sake of our community's children and the health and the future of our community. In our last joint meeting, you heard through the support of our Board of Education how, and certainly through the support of the Board of Commissioners, how WCPS is leading Maryland with the strongest apprenticeship program which supports our local workforce. The strength of our school system has a direct correlation to the vitality of our local economy. A strong, fully supported school system is fundamental in supporting small businesses and serving as an economic catalyst to our community.
I was going to say, yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think they gave you a clicker, but I don't think that's working. So if you want, if you just want to say next slide, they can control it from back there.
All right, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Good timing there.
Right. They're trying to follow along,
Yeah.
but if you just.
As you can see, this budget reflects 4 key priorities. Addressing the associated costs related to inflation, enhancing safety and security, mental health, and behavior supports, providing a meaningful salary initiative to attract and retain teachers, support staff, and administrators. And finally, meeting the mandates set forth by the blueprint of Maryland's future. Making enhancements in these areas all contribute to what we want for our students. Greater and higher outcomes of success during their academic career, during their extracurricular activities, and in their pursuits beyond graduation. We can move to the next slide. Historically, funding from the state has been the largest incremental increase in revenue for the school system, and this year is no different. In terms of our per pupil funding, Washington County has seen a slight decrease in the average student enrollment over the last 3 years. However, that decrease in enrollment has been offset by an increase in the foundation rate, providing approximately $2.9 million in additional foundation allocation. On the other hand, Washington County Public Schools has seen a considerable increase in students needing free and reduced meals. Last year, about 47% of our students received free and reduced meals. Compare that to about 58% of our students receiving free and reduced meals this year. That's an increase of 11%. As a result, we're receiving a greater amount of compensatory education funds for FY24, which you see here in this slide. This change in our free and reduced meals rate is reflective of the growing needs of our community. From our perspective, those growing needs also extend into the classroom for our students and extend far beyond the needs for meals. We'll move to the next slide. In order to fully fund the Board of Education's budget, WCPS will need $7.95 million from the county government beyond the Board of County Commissioners allocated, what you've allocated for this current fiscal year. I recognize your draft budget presented by county staff holds us harmless for the reduced student enrollment we just discussed. As you saw in your own budget presentation last week, inflation is a major driver of increases across the board. As the county's largest employer, let me just paint this picture for a moment. Higher fuel costs for nearly 200 buses, higher food prices for our school meals, higher paper prices doubling over the last year, which impacts our instructional materials. I believe you get the picture of the increased pressures regarding inflation. More importantly, funding for the school system at the hold harmless level does not take into consideration those growing needs in our community. As you just saw with the number of students requiring free and reduced meals, unfortunately, the family unit for many of our students is not strong, and in many cases, not stable. Students are coming to us with significant mental health needs and behavior challenges, which require more individualized staffing and specialized services to support them in their learning. You will see throughout this presentation how these factors are impacting our proposed budget. We'll move to the next slide. During this current school year, I recognize the areas of immediate need where additional staff would better support our students through the support of our Board of Education, and we acted on those most critical needs. We're really in need to address growing class size with a focus at the elementary level. This year we added 3 new elementary teachers that should be included in the upcoming year's budget. I also believe our students with special needs require greater support, and we've identified opportunities for special education teachers, paraprofessionals, occupational therapists, and board-certified behavior analysts across our system. As you see in this next slide, staffing for safety and security is where you will see the most notable increase in new positions. We have hired 17 of 19 school safety and security assistants this year. They're working closely with our school resource officers and school staff to enhance safety, in particular our city, middle, and high schools. I'm happy to share that many of those safety and security assistants have completed their training over the last month and are now working in our schools. We will need to fund these positions in the next fiscal year to make this initiative successful. Finally, this section also includes a budget and financial reporting analyst, which is helping us meet the extensive and complex budgeting and reporting requirements of the blueprint. As we move to the next slide, Washington County Public Schools has been very fortunate to receive a number of grants, particularly the federal grants that were provided to schools to help students recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of those were used to support specific initiatives or to fill a staffing gap where funds were not immediately available in the general fund. Because these initiatives have been so successful in supporting our students, particularly those receiving special education services, we need to move these positions into the general fund for longevity and sustainability. As we move to the next slide, like Washington County government, our school system is feeling the pain of inflation that's also being experienced across our country. We estimate that the budget will have to account for just under $2 million to continue to provide some of the services and programs that our students are currently receiving. We cannot let these inflationary costs force us to make cuts in other areas of the budget. The needs of our students are simply too great. As we move to the next slide, this budget will also have to support some of our visionary goals of the blueprint for Maryland's future legislation. This year, we started paying the tuition for our students who attend Hagerstown Community College or complete an HCCC course as a high school student. That will continue for next year, and at that time, we will also need to pay for the students' textbooks for those classes. Also, I want to mention, under the blueprint, WCPS will pay for advanced placement and international baccalaureate exams if students choose to take them, which will be another new expense required under the blueprint. Over the last year, we have also seen a considerable increase in our English language learners. That enrollment increase is quite significant. The blueprint mandates that 75% of the funding must follow students. I want to reemphasize that, 75% of the funding must follow students. In the area of English learners, WCPS has not kept pace with the 75% benchmark. For the upcoming fiscal year, we must catch up with this 75% threshold, which will allow us to provide the necessary supports for our English language learners. And finally, WCPS will be required to provide funding for our local workforce development board, commonly known as the Western Maryland Consortium. That funding equates to $62 per student, which is the equivalent of $1.3 million. As we move to this next slide, it's to be expected that there will be increased cost for compensation and benefits. Washington County Public Schools needs to keep pace with the minimum wage requirements, so we will be increasing the hourly pay for our lunch assistants. The school system also has to contribute more towards employee pensions and health insurance premiums. However, I just mentioned that WCPS's insurance plan is still performing at a high level and beating the rate of medical inflation. Thus, the board is proposing only a 3% increase, while medical inflation is twice that, in some cases even more. One aspect that is certainly beyond our control is the Time to Care Act. I'm sure you're familiar with that legislation that provides paid family and medical leave for all Maryland employees. Like county government, our employees will be required to pay into this program next year, and WCPS will also have to make a contribution to that policy, which will amount to around $900,000 for the next fiscal year. I want to stay on this slide here and just emphasize again, it's imperative that we provide another meaningful salary initiative for our employees in the year ahead. Our WCPS staff, they're simply extraordinary, every single one of them. And from our teachers to our administrators to our support professionals, every one of them plays a role, a critical role, in supporting our students. In the midst of unparalleled changes in education over the last 2 years, our team has persevered and pulled together for the sake of our students. I'm beyond grateful for all of them for what they do. I'll just add that public education has been challenged by the teacher shortage in recent years, even before the COVID-19 pandemic. We're now experiencing shortages in staffing across the board. In addition to teachers, it's also difficult to hire bus drivers who safely support our students, paraprofessionals who provide support, instructional support in the classroom, and specialized service providers like speech language pathologists and social workers. Our children deserve the very best, and we live in a uniquely situated area where our staff can easily find competitive career opportunities elsewhere. We must do everything we can to retain our high-quality staff and to attract the most promising prospective staff. While this value you see here is quite significant, I ask you to consider this. WCPS is the largest employer in the county with over 3,500 employees, most of them taxpayers in this county. This resource pool is allocated equitably, if allocated equitably to these groups, represents a 7% salary increase. We'll move to the next slide. Just to add here, while COVID has changed our educational environment, we've also seen that our students that left us in March of 2020 with the COVID-19 shutdown, when they came back, they were different students. Over the course of that closure, many students were lacking structure. They experienced unknown amounts of trauma. And now more of our community's children need greater mental health and behavior supports in our schools. These, again, are critical supports that help schools address these challenges that create barriers to student learning. Excuse me. If we move to the next slide, just continuing with these positions. Positions noted on this slide support students in schools every day, either by working directly with students or providing structured support to staff in schools where they more effectively meet the needs of our children. Some of these professionals also support school staff by addressing students with mental health needs and challenging behaviors. As we move to the next slide, before I presented my superintendent's recommended budget to our Board of Education, I think it's worth mentioning. I ensured that I exercise my due diligence in examining each of the school system's expenses. I sat down with our department heads and supervisors to identify options to reduce costs in October. This was done through a line-by-line review of the respective budgets. Together, we identified over $2 million in cost reductions. As we move to the next to last slide, this pie chart shows how the increase in this recommended budget is allocated among the priorities that I mentioned at the opening of this presentation. Again, this is truly a needs-based budget, and I appreciate your consideration and feedback through this process. It's a shared goal of superintendent and this board to operate WCPS in a proactive manner that enhances student outcomes. As we move to the last slide here and prepare to answer questions or comments of the board members, I want to conclude by just sharing a few things. I'd like to, first of all, thank you as a Board of Commissioners for your partnership with our Board of Education. The last time we met, as we mentioned earlier, was our pleasure to highlight the many successes of our students. And you contribute to that success of our community's children by funding education. We thank you for that. Our apprenticeship program is the top in the state, and it is paying dividends certainly in this community already. We're building a highly trained, highly skilled workforce, and many of our students are graduating from high school and pursuing full-time employment with their apprenticeship locations. Once again, we thank this board for your funding support for that program. I was also glad to see that county government employees received a mid-year COLA of 9.5%. I believe our community's public servants work hard to promote a high quality of life and provide quality services to our residents, and they deserve to be compensated accordingly. It is my hope that our Washington County Public Schools employees, we can offer a similar increase to our educators and our staff who serve the community's children each and every day. This Board of Commissioners is highly proactive in promoting that Washington County is open for business every day. A strong public education system is the backbone of economic development in any thriving and healthy community. New initiatives like the Meredith Medical College, new business like Hitachi Rail, expanding business opportunities, workforce development, all move forward when communities make an investment in education. Wise communities see the value in continually investing in our local public schools. This minimizes the consequences when citizens are not employed and are not productive members of the community. When this occurs, it results in far more costly services on the back end. At this time, I'd like to express once again my gratitude for our board, certainly our finance team members joining me, Mr. Prue, Mr. Brandenburg, Mr. Sisler from our finance team, certainly our senior leadership. I appreciate their support in assisting me and the Board of Education in preparing today's presentation. At this time, I'll turn it over to our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Prue, who will provide a couple of highlights. I believe you've got some handouts there. He'll walk you through those handouts. We're available to answer questions, and certainly we welcome your feedback and your comments. Also, today's presentation, we provided all Board of Commissioners and the County Administrator with this presentation and script. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Svine. Commissioners, I'll be brief. In the book we provided each of you this morning, you have 3 tabs. Of course, the first tab is the PowerPoint presentation. What I'd like to draw your attention to is there's a little ribbon banner in the top right corner of each of those slides. That ribbon banner then correlates to the budget summary, which is in the second tab. So for instance, and I just happen to flip open to slide 8, it references section 2C. If you flip over into the 3-page summary section, section 2C is on the first page. And then you can see actually the detail of each of those items that are related on that slide and the cost that's associated with each of those individual line items. As you're looking at that summary document, there are page and line numbers out to the right. That then refers you to the third slide or the third tab in your book, which is our full 41-page line item budget. So that you can see where that expense on the summary correlates into the full budget, where you can see historically the funding that's been spent on that particular line item, as well as the current FY23 budget and the proposed FY24 budget, and any changes that may have correlated into that line item on that page. So I think with that, we're happy to accept any questions you may have.
I just had a quick one. You mentioned 19 school security assistants. So that's a big chunk of school security. Are they SROs or police, as I call them? Are they just, so how do we, I guess in my mind we need security, not, real security. And I don't know what a security assistant is. Can you?
Yes, sir, Commissioner Wagner. I'll be glad to provide an overview, and Mr. Prue, who has worked extensively, will probably expand on my comments. Security assistants are not resource officers. They are just that, security assistants that are designed to be very proactive. They work with the school administration and other school staff to be highly visible in our schools, both before the school day in the parking lots, in particular at our high schools, developing relationships with students so that as concerning information is presented, those security assistants can work with the school administration to be proactive to address those matters. Certainly during the school day, during transitions and in time periods where students should be engaged in classroom activities, they're monitoring our security surveillance, and they're out in our hallways making sure students are where they need to be. Once again, working with our principals, and if necessary, if there are violations that may be of the nature of potentially breaking the law, then they would engage with our resource officers. Certainly, at the end of the school day, they spend time at our high schools monitoring parking lots. Also, they're providing support in addition to our SROs at many of our sporting events. Each of these security assistants went through extensive training, and I'll allow Mr. Prude to expand on that, but that gives you hopefully an overview.
That gives me a good idea. I'm just picturing real security as police or SROs, but I get it. I mean, they're monitoring parking lots, coming in and out of the building, in the hallways.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering what happens if the worst scenario happens.
They're designed to be more proactive,
Right.
working with the school administration. If there is a more serious infraction where it could be a violation of the law, then they would work and report that.
Did you have them previously?
We did not.
So these are all 19 new positions?
That is correct.
Right.
And that is a practice that is pretty common in many districts that choose to be pretty proactive with safety and security.
And I think, Commissioner Wagner, I think to your point, we have ongoing discussions previously with Sheriff Mullendore, and we have a meeting next week, or in the coming weeks here with Sheriff Albert as well, and also in discussions with Chief Kiefer with Hagerstown Police Department. We have a desire to continue to grow the SRO program. As you talk about an unthinkable act that we don't want to talk about, but we do plan for. These positions also become an integral part of those safety and security plans, our mass reunification plans, should we have an unthinkable event. And we work continually with various county staff members, as well as folks from DSS and Meritus and the Health Department on that mass reunification planning. Should we have that type of event, we're prepared.
And then one more question is, you mentioned lunch assistants. I assume that's your entry-level pay scale? So what happens to the other entry-level pay scales?
So lunch assistants, not to be confused with food service assistants. We really have two delineations of staff there. So our entry-level pay scale is folks that we consider standard contract here every day, 180 days, and perpetually until they decide to depart. That starts out, those staff are currently slightly above minimum wage. I believe that starting salary is $14.25, and that's our food service assistants that are serving meals, cooking, cashiering. It's our bus attendants that assist our bus drivers, and it is our general, what we call our grade 3 entry-level custodial positions that are doing the majority of our cleaning. And they're at $14.25 an hour, roughly. Our lunch assistants we have a cadre of staff that work approximately 2 hours a day in elementary and middle schools that assist students with, can you help me open my juice container? I forgot a straw. I need some extra napkins, helping to clean up spills in the cafeteria. Those staff are exactly minimum wage and have been really, considerably for a long time. We increased their wage, of course, at the beginning of this year to account for the change in minimum wage in January that we just undertook. This proposal to increase their wage again is to continue to comply with the law and the increase to $14 an hour that we expect by the legislation in January of 2024.
Yeah, we have the same with that lower wage
Absolutely.
disparity. So I was curious if just not targeting one group,
We've been working on the entire scale. We made a significant movement through our negotiations process with our support personnel last year to increase the bottom level. We actually did a collapse of grades 1 and 2 into grade 3. So we brought our lunch assistants, crossing guards, bus attendants all the way up to grade 3 where our custodians were to get ahead of minimum wage. I mean, it's an interesting thing to think that 10 years ago or even 20 years ago, back in 2005, a starting wage for an employee at the Board of Education was nearly twice what minimum wage was. But as we've increased minimum wage at such a significant amount, salary increases have not been able to keep pace with that. And so now we've been chasing that. So we made a concerted effort to do that. But as you understand and as you have with county staff, we have significant troubles attracting staff that aren't even minimum wage jobs, trades positions. Diesel mechanics, plumbers, electricians. Those are areas of significant concern right now, as well as our paraprofessionals that support our students every day.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a few questions, and I probably will submit more to you because I have a lot of notes on individual items in here. But your state budget is 22.1. That's what you received, and how much of an increase was that again?
That'll be the increase over the FY23 funding. It's approximately 10%.
So what's
almost 11%.
So the total dollars you received, you anticipate is 22.1?
No, that's actually the increase over the FY23 allocation. So in the third tab, total state revenue for expected for FY '24 is $229.
Okay, that's what I was
0.9
getting
million.
at. Okay, so you had a $22.1 million increase.
Correct.
And be interested in how that was allocated, and the way you think that one through. You talked in your comments about having to address growing class size and wanting to reduce that, but you also have reduction in enrollment and the hiring of 42 new positions. Of course, 18 of those are security assistants. A number of them are behavioral specialists and things like that. I'm just trying to understand how that plays out. A few of them are teachers assistants, but, you know, I'm
Yes, sir.
interested in that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Our enrollment has remained relatively flat. What we're seeing since the pandemic, since we've moved out of the pandemic, actually an increase there. With our enrollment, we have made some shifts this year for next year at the secondary level, where we can address overcrowding because of those shifts at the elementary level. To be honest with you, with some of our smaller schools, they're either, in some cases, just one teacher, sometimes two. So when those numbers go up and there's an influx, that we're limited in terms of our needs. So it's pretty complex at the elementary level. When we have growth at certain levels where we can make adjustments and shift teachers, we do, but because of, in some cases, some of our smaller schools, we have limited options there. I'll yield to Mr. Prue for
Well, I think if I could, I think I want to address part of that, because the second part is related to this last question. So you have more special education students. You have more English as second learner students. You have apparently an increase in the number of security concerns, because that's what's driving the 18 security assistants. And then you have an increase. Now, I'm not sure this is just a definitional issue or if it's real. An increase in the number of people from 47% students from 47% to 58% that are eligible for food assistance. Now, that could be, just as we talked, I think, what gets you into that program is substantially higher. You know, income level might be $70,000 for a family of four. It gets you into the food assistance program, correct?
Correct. It's based on a percentage of the poverty
So
level
it's not,
by household size.
Yeah, but it's not what I would call, you know, necessarily poverty, because we have, in other government programs, people having nearly $90,000 in income being eligible for assistance programs. So all of these things reflect a changing demographic balance that you're adjusting to with those 42 people that you increased, correct?
Correct, Commissioner Harvey, and to your point, I believe you're spot on in terms of the increased demand regarding special education services. We're seeing some of, since the pandemic, some of the most extreme challenges that are driven by individualized education plan, and it's really maxing our system in terms of our ability to provide specialized support. Also, what I heard in my transition during my entry plan was consistent from parents to staff members, and it was a pre-K through 12 issue in terms of significant mental health challenges and behaviors, sometimes involving special education students, but not always, which is really stressing our system. We're seeing the challenges, as I mentioned, the secondary level. We've countered with trying to be proactive with our security assistants, along with behavioral specialists to provide supports. But we're also seeing probably the most extreme behaviors and mental health challenges with our youngest children at the elementary level. And we've been providing, where appropriate, special ed services, but also behavior supports. It is certainly a significant crisis, not only in Washington County, but I'm hearing this consistently with my colleagues in other districts across Maryland, and as I interact with my national colleagues, where everyone is, they have similar challenges, but I believe looking at the poverty rate, it's been exacerbated in particular in our more urban settings in our city, middle, and high schools. But we're feeling the impact throughout, both in our rural schools as well as our urban schools as well.
So I will submit some questions for you, I think, through our staff here. But just two last comments. If I was to look at the pay scales, and you addressed the lower level pay scales, we've talked about that, bus drivers, paraprofessionals, teachers' assistants, and the like. If it was me, I would have liked to have had our pay increase focused on the non-supervisory workers, in the county level. Maybe you can tier it so you could put more of the assets resources into those people that are more challenged to maintain a good standard of living. And then one of the other issues that you're dealing with is a lot of movement of children of families that are below the median income level. I believe Pangbourne is an example of that, where you have 50% of the students moving in or out of the school during the year. Is that also an issue in more of the schools, to the level of Pangbourne, or is it a trend you're seeing?
We're seeing that impact in a number of our elementary schools and secondary schools that have higher levels of or concentration of poverty. We're seeing that as we reference the explosion of English language learners. Many of them have been attracted to the area because of reasonable housing and opportunities for work, and with that tend to be pretty transit in terms of housing, often switching from one school to the next. And certainly that's one thing that the blueprint provides us with some support to kind of provide those wraparound services that are needed with those families.
Well, I look forward to working with you. Two big issues: compensation, staying competitive, and then the inflation issue. And I think you highlighted those very effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, I have a couple questions. Thank you for presenting to us today. My first question might actually be for Commissioner Barr. We had a conversation last week about the school board's budget, among other things, and there was a date later this month. Can you remind me what that date was for submitting I guess maybe a preliminary budget to the state?
Yes, correct.
Talk about that.
We were informed at our MACO meeting last week that if through our budget discussion process, and I think, John, you can help me out here a little bit too.
I think you're talking about non-recurring. I think he's talking about non-recurring.
And I could speak to that if you'd like.
Yes.
There's a provision in the state law that allows for allocations of funding from county boards of education, or from county boards of commissioners to the Board of Education for items that are deemed non-recurring. So for instance, if you wanted to allocate a lump of money, let's say to compensation or inflationary measures, that would not qualify. But an item, for instance, that the commissioners used to provide years ago was to fund the cycle of bus replacements. That's about a $1.2 million, I don't have the page in front of me, but I know the team is behind me looking it up, but about a $1.2 million lift annually. And of course, buses, like any other vehicle, that price has increased considerably. $1.7 million. So that is an item that the commissioners used to fund outside of maintenance of effort. So the reason for this allocation is that you can identify certain ways to assist your Board of Education without it counting towards the maintenance of effort formula. So that may be an item that would be advantageous to the commissioners.
So Jeff, is there anything in your request from the county that's above maintenance of effort? It sounds like it may not be, but is there anything in that additional request that might fall into that category?
Well, as I said, buses is one of those things where the commissioners could choose to do that. School resource officers is another area that I know we've discussed over the years. That is, that in most counties, that's paid for at the county or the municipal level for the officers that are provided for service inside schools.
So that wouldn't be considered recurring?
That it's recurring. It's recurring, but you could program shift that And buses are recurring as well, but large assets are part of this non-recurring cost that can be pulled out. So buses could be pulled out, school resource officers could be pulled out as a way of taking things out of the current operating budget that, and essentially acts as an assistant to the school system without it impacting maintenance of effort.
Okay. Could you share with us, not right now, but maybe a list of other non-recurring? I see salaries as something that's recurring regardless.
Absolutely.
So
I agree with you
I
on
don't
that.
think that necessarily meets the criteria what I'm thinking about.
There are items that, while that provision of the law is a little bit confusing, but there are a number of items that could be deemed as recurring costs, but are allocable under the non-recurring cost umbrella, and we can identify those for
And
you.
what is their deadline for that?
End of the month, I believe.
It is.
April
it is the
1.
end-
April
It is
1.
April 1.
March 30th.
Okay.
Yep.
So we would have to act rather quick on that.
March 30th is what I was
March
told
30.
at the Mako meeting. So we only have, excuse me, thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Kiefer. We only have one more meeting collectively that we can address this and submit our thoughts to the state. So.
We have two. So we meet on the 21st and the 28th, but it is cut a little close.
Well,
so.
yeah, it's cutting it awful close on the 28th.
President Barr, if it is the desire of the Board of Commissioners, work with our team to provide that information at your next meeting.
Yeah, because I'm assuming, obviously, some of the things we're talking about are already programmed into your budget, right? So
They are, correct.
So if the county would fund those in some other fashion, then there could be an adjustment there.
Correct. It's an allocation shift of how we would spend the money then.
Right.
My other question also has to do with the free and reduced meals. You mentioned a 47 to 58% bump, and it sounds like the poverty guidelines have adjusted, okay? But it is what it is. If parents apply for that program and they qualify. So it's an expense that needs to be met. The additional financial burden that would be placed on the Board of Ed, is that anything, because it deals with meals, is that anything covered by the federal government, the state government, or does that just come out of your operating budget? How is that increased financial demand met?
To your comments, Commissioner Kiefer, I want to provide a general statement regarding the increase, and then I'll yield to Mr. Prue to speak to the federal funds that we receive and so forth regarding school nutrition. I think it's beneficial for commissioners and the public to be aware that the process in terms of identification of free and reduced meals has changed. I believe it's much easier to more accurately identify students that were still probably qualified 2 years ago now. They were there, they just were not completing the form. So the process does not require a completion of a form now. So most, I believe, if not all districts in Maryland saw an increase in free and reduced meals in terms of those students that qualify. So I think it's worth that awareness from a public standpoint, and I'll yield to Mr. Prue to provide some additional comments in terms of specific funding.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Kiefer. So the school meals program is known as a reimbursement program. It is a federally authorized program under the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Act. The most recent reauthorization act was 2010, and it's long overdue for reauthorization. It's supposed to be done every 5 years. But it is, at the base level is federal funding to the school nutrition department, which is an enterprise fund and not reflected in the general fund operating budget. There is reimbursement then for meals that are served both in the paid, free, and reduced category from the federal government, and on a sliding tier scale. That reimbursement for a paid meal may be less than 50 cents, but at the free level, it's several dollars. That money flows directly into the food service fund. The state also has a small portion in the reduced price category, where the state now the state of Maryland picks up the 30 cents at breakfast, 40 cents at lunch, which is the maximum allocatable cost to a student if they're on the reduced price meal program. The state has been paying that, and actually this year is the first year that program is fully implemented. On the paid level, then that's a fee that for a meal served to a student that we would expect to receive at the point of service from the student or prepaid by the parent Oftentimes, families don't pay that cost, and so we end up with outstanding debts. We do the best we can to recoup that, but if not, that's a write-off that often is covered by the general fund, just simply because the federal law does not allow the food service fund to take that write-off, so it has to be picked up somewhere. Typically, it's a fairly small number. We have used federal dollars over the last couple of years to make sure that as we entered this new year, going back into the paid meal program, we were universal free for the last 2 years that the federal government paid for. Is that we started with zero balances at the start of this year. But at the midway point, we've already accrued about $23,000 in meal
So is
net.
that the only general fund subsidy you pay into the
That's correct.
meal funding?
Other than that, the program is fully self-sustaining.
Okay, thank you.
One very last thing. Been trying to get a handle on Kerwin, and appreciate the briefing you gave to us at your facility. And clearly Kerwin's having an impact already on costs with even, the qualifications for teachers getting a $10,000 pay raise if they get a certain certificate. I'm trying to understand the implications going forward for us, not just this year, but going forward, because we have to think strategically about how we're going to align our tax structure and making our decisions now, and even some obligations we may make right now for another program could have out-year consequences for us. So we may or may not want to start that commitment because we may need to focus it here. I think maybe Emeritus Hospital might be one of those cases, their new school program, because we have real competition for these scarce dollars. I look forward to maybe trying to get more of a tutorial about what those real implications are, Chairman Williams and Dr. Savine.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Harvey, you raise a good point. The blueprint with the funding must follow the students. We're seeing an increased commitment and funds from the state, but also there are local pressures as you look at the 5 pillars regarding our implementation plan in particular. I look at just the aspect of lifting up the teaching profession. And you mentioned the teacher salaries, which there's a percentage, a 10% percentage mark.
And no choice here on our part.
Correct. That is mandated. And what we see with, the 2026, all school districts in the state of Maryland should have a starting pay of $60,000. Then you mentioned the $10,000 National Board Certification bump one, which enhances another $10,000. And then if they're serving in a high poverty school, then another $7,000 increase. So while there are increased state funds, there are, you've heard me say from a local standpoint, that also puts local pressure, in particular FY24 and FY25, where we have local dollars in order to, that are needed in order to achieve some of those items. Now, I haven't mentioned our paraprofessionals. You recognize that some of our most challenging positions to fill that in many cases remain open are those paraprofessional positions. But I'll also, while we have focused, you heard Mr. Prue reference this current year's budget and certainly next year's budget, trying to make sure our teachers and paraprofessionals are very competitive in terms of salaries. I think it's also worth mentioning that our administrators, as we look at market drivers and things of that nature, you start looking at, as we lift up the teaching profession, many of our administrators are not competitive as you compare them to other nearby localities. And in some cases, as we lift up the teacher salaries, some will be able to make as much and go back into a 10-month position. So we recognize that, we want the best quality teachers and paraprofessionals. Leadership matters. I've shared with our board, when you have high-quality leaders at the central office and certainly school levels, that increases the likelihood that we're going to attract and retain the best teachers. So right now, our most pressing issues are certainly greatly enhancing our paraprofessional positions, certainly lifting up the teacher profession, but I'll just share with you, right behind there, becoming probably a shortage area is going to be the demands of keeping high-quality administrators and supervisors in our schools. President Williams, I know you've lived it. Certainly, I'll be glad to yield the floor. I know you and all board members have worked through the complexities, and you hear from all units. And this is just one aspect of the multiple pillars in the blueprint, and certainly each of them create their additional drivers and challenges that presents in terms of local funding.
Yes, I would acknowledge that there are challenges with the blueprint, but this is also an incredible opportunity for Washington County Public Schools to do good things for its students. And so, Commissioner Harvey, I look forward to working with the superintendent and the board to plan some informational work sessions where we can help to inform the commissioners what lies ahead.
I would just like to suggest, I know President Williams and I have talked, and President Barr, I know I mentioned in my presentation, we had a very successful joint meeting not too long ago where we focused on our apprenticeship program, strong CT program, some of the best in the state, and we were able to highlight, provide an overview of the blueprint. Certainly, I'll just offer, I know we talked about another joint meeting, perhaps early April. We remain open there. I would like to be able to focus from an instructional standpoint in terms of our focus on reading, the science of reading and mathematics, certainly through the investment of a preschool program for 4-year-olds in all of our elementary schools. We're reaping the benefits. Now, just recently this year, our kindergarten readiness results are ranked number 4. A few years ago, prior to not having preschool for 4-year-olds, we were ranked in terms of kindergarten readiness at the very bottom in Maryland at 24. So thanks to your support and that investment, you see that's a gift that will continue to give back over time. Certainly, in highlighting those areas, we could dive a little bit deeper into the salary initiative to discuss in detail why this salary pool, in my opinion, it's needed, every single penny of it needed in order to keep us very competitive in terms of the challenges that we're facing at all levels of our units with paraprofessionals, with teachers and administrators.
Yeah, I wanted to make one last comment. It seems like we've bypassed a big one was inflation. It looks to me like your 6% of your budgets, and as ours is, as Washington County's is, we're dealing with it too. I think that probably, quick math in my head, $20 million or something inflation in your budget.
Absolutely.
And you know, and that's making it tough on all of us to, you know, to be able to fund and help everybody. So we wouldn't even be sitting here, you're asking for 8 or 9 million and you got 20 million in inflation. So that's just a point we sort of missed there.
Absolutely correct. Thank you.
One more question. I know we're over time, but sometimes these meetings don't happen often enough. When you talk about teacher shortages, could you maybe also provide some information on, is it in certain positions, certain subjects that you're having? Is it STEM? Is it elementary? And are you able to, I know, I think of, you're the school board, we're the Board of County Commissioners, we're different, but we have sometimes difficulties with different divisions. Just that specialty is in higher demand. So, you know, there's not all, you know, divisions have exact parity in what their pay is. Some require different certifications, some don't necessarily require those certifications. And again, just whatever the market demand is. Are you finding that when you look at your teacher shortages, or is it just varied across the board? There's no consistency? And then are you allowed to, let's just say it's a high-level math, I don't know, that you're having trouble filling. In my mind, market demand might, you know, require a higher pay for that than a subject you don't have trouble filling, and I don't want to give an example of a subject because I don't know what it would be.
Commissioner Kiefer, thanks for raising that point. Sadly, I stand here, or sit here at this day, and pretty much every area of teaching it's a major shortage area. I never dreamed, a decade ago that I would be sitting here today saying that physical education teachers and social studies teachers are a shortage area. A decade ago, that was not the case. They were a dime a dozen. But now, in every area, we are impacted by simply not enough teachers that have gone through our colleges that are out there ready to fill those positions. Certainly, some of the highest areas of need that result in positions not being filled are special education, sometimes our higher level math, but sadly, we're looking at a crisis in education where all subject areas are a major shortage.
Okay, thank you.
Any other last questions, comments? Thank you, Dr. Svine. Thank you, President Williams.
Thank you.
Board members, thank you. Okay, next item is FY24 Community Organizational Funding Recommendations. Susan Buchanan, good morning.
Good morning, Susan Buchanan, Director, Office of Grant Management. And I'm here this morning to present the FY24 Community Organization Funding Recommendations. The Community Organization Funding Committee is comprised of 5 members individually appointed by each county commissioner. The committee is charged with reviewing and evaluating annual grant application requests submitted by community-based local nonprofits. After their careful review, the committee makes funding allocation recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners within the established annual funding priorities. In December, the committee received 42 funding applications from 41 separate organizations. The total amount of funding requested was $1,647,826. The amount of funds available is $1 million. Each member of the committee independently reviewed and scored applications over a period of approximately 6 weeks, and then the committee met as a group and deliberated funding allocation recommendations for each application received. The recommendations presented today were made in accordance with the parameters established by the board. The recommendations are subject to acceptance or amendment by the Board of County Commissioners during the annual approval of the budget approval process. You can see I have attached, there's a spreadsheet that does list each application, organization name, the project name, the amount of funds requested, and the recommendations of the committee. I'd be happy now to answer any questions about any of the recommendations, the process.
You're not looking for a motion or anything, right?
The way the process works, this is a presentation for your awareness. It's part of the budgetary process. These would be approved when you approve the budget in May. You can make adjustments today, you can, but that's the process.
Yeah, it would be hard for me to challenge their decision when I don't know any of the criteria they went by, and their discussion of the 5 members of that. It would, I got to trust the people we appointed that they came up with a sound system, and maybe next time around we get a snapshot of exactly how they do that. I think you already told us, but I'm old, I forgot. I don't know. But
I do come back each year in the summer to set the amount of funding and for the the following year. And I think that this year, maybe it would be a good idea just to have some of those discussions, provide some detail of what the questions asked, the things that the committee looks, and we can have those discussions as we prepare for next year.
Yeah, and obviously, and go over the criteria that we've been using, and if any additional criteria that this board would like to see.
Yes.
Moving forward in this process. So, I mean, we can provide that information now to you
Yes.
again if you want it, but I think there may be some thoughts about additional criteria or changing the criteria a little bit for next year.
Were there any groups that submitted a request? These are the ones that were recommended. And from this, it looks like they went through and then distributed amongst those and cut some and maintained what the request was. Were there others that never even made the list? And if
These
so,
are all
what-
the applications received,
These are all the applications received?
yes, for this fund.
Looks like there's 3 that received no funding.
Looks
Under
like
recommended,
4
there's a.
Yeah, I'm
just
looking
a
at it here.
line.
There's 4 recommended applications at 0
4.
funding. It looks like just at the,
Susan, I believe this was the program, the grant program that we agreed to provide some capital funding or allow for capital projects to be applied for through the COF program. What percentage, just rough idea, don't calculate it, would you say are going towards capital projects versus operating projects this year?
it still is overwhelming in the favor of operating costs. I don't have the percentages, but I can say, last year was the first year we did allow that, have capital expenses as an eligible cost as well as operating. And last year, there were 9 applications that contained some capital expenses, and 5 were funded. This year, we had 8 applications and 7 were funded. So,
About the same.
but, yes. And some applications, it may just be a small portion of the request that could be considered capital, and there's other things involved as well.
Other questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to, obviously, to the group who made these
Yes,
recommendations.
thank you.
I don't know how many hours they spent. I don't know if you have any
They-
idea, but.
Thank you to the Community Organization Funding Committee, because they put a lot of hours in. As you know, they're doing double duty this year because they're also doing the surplus funding, which I will be back in a couple weeks to present that.
Right, so we appreciate them.
soon.
I know the board appreciates their
So
work,
they've
so
been
thank you.
reading a lot of proposals.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, FY '24 personnel requests, Michelle Gordon. Kendall?
Michelle Gordon, Chief Financial Officer.
Kendall DeSonia, Deputy County Attorney and Acting Interim Human Resources Director.
Each year, personnel requests and other personnel adjustments are submitted through the budget process. These requests are reviewed by the Director of Human Resources, the Chief Financial Officer, and the County Administrator, and recommendations are provided to the Board of County Commissioners based on those meetings. Personnel adjustment request for fiscal year '24 total $4.3 million. The recommendations from the committee for personnel requests total $712,390. Summary information is provided in your packet, as well as detailed information regarding each individual request. $860,000 was recommended by the salary committee for salary scale realignment of grades 1 through 12. And then $520,000 was recommended by the salary committee for consideration of a 1% COLA for retirees. In your packet, you should also have a history included regarding the COLAs that we've provided to retirees. I just wanted to go over some of the assumptions that were used in revisions to the salary scale. You should have the new salary scale in your packet. Revisions were recommended to bring the salary scale into compliance with Maryland minimum wage requirements. For the fiscal year '20 budget, we included that $860,000 to revise the salary scale for lower grades and for part-time seasonal employees. We did exclude patrol, detention, and emergency services, as those scales are significantly higher than the Maryland minimum wage already. For the full-time and part-time scale, that's the first portion of the salary scale. It's full-time and part-time regular employees. We increased grade 1, step 1, to $14.75 an hour, and that's shown in column 1, the very first column. It says prior base. So it's the second column. So the original grade 1, step 1 started at $11.02. We increased the base to $14.75, so it's a 33.85% increase. Now, once the 1% COLA is approved for July the 1st, that starting salary will increase to $14.90 per hour for grade 1, step 1. Maryland minimum wage as of January the 1st of '23 is $13.25 per hour. It will increase to $15 an hour by January the 1st of 2025, which is in fiscal year '25. We are receiving information that could potentially increase earlier based on Governor Moore. Because we're increasing it to $14.90 per hour, if that does get enacted early, we should be in a good position to jump right ahead to that $15 an hour. For grades 1 through 12, I increased the percentage between grades and by varying amounts. Formerly, they were 8% between grades. So for grades 1 through 3, they're increasing by 3.5%. From grades 4 through 6, 4%, and then 5%, 6%, 7%, and then it transitions back to 8% per grade once you get up to grade 13. Grades 13 through 22 received no increase as a part of this adjustment and assumes that the 9.5% mid-year COLA was satisfactory, and that those grades will receive the normal COLA on July the 1st. We have about 420 employees included in grades 1 through 12. The average increase for each employee is about 2.7%, with those lower grades receiving much higher increases than those upper grades.
Michelle, every grade gets a COLA, right?
In grades, every grade gets a COLA, correct?
Right.
Every grade gets a COLA.
So this is obviously, as Michelle mentioned, this is trying to address the scale, the bottom end of the scale. As we talked about back, when we brought the COLA to you, we were talking about trying to address that. We didn't have enough time to do it then. We told you we'd do it as part of the budget process, so this is staff's recommendation to try to address their lower scales.
Just the lower grades.
The lower grades, correct, thanks.
The cost projection also assumes that all impacted full and part-time employees should stay at their same grade and step. However, in grades 1 through 3, new employees in grade 1, for example, used to start at step 8, so it doesn't make sense for them to stay at a step 8. They'll move backwards to a step 1 or 2 based on their years of service. So all employees in grades 4 through 12 will stay at their current grade and step. Employees in grades 1 through 3 will be adjusted to where they belong on the scale. Pretty much the same assumptions were included for the part-time seasonal scale, which is the bottom 6 grades at the scale in your packet. We created a separate part-time seasonal scale from separate part-time regular employees. They make just a small amount more than what their regular part-time employee counterparts would make. So for part-time grade 1, step 1, after the COLA is initiated on July the 1st, they'll be at $15.52 versus $14.90. Those positions are much harder to fill, so it makes sense that they would make a little bit more than the part-time regular employees. Part-time regular employees have benefits where seasonal employees do not. The average increase for employees on the part-time seasonal scale is about 2.6%, and each part-time seasonal employee will be placed on the scale in the current grade on the step closest to their current salary, but not less than what their current salary is. And it will remove the premium pay that we're currently using to bring employees to minimum wage. So it'll eliminate that premium pay and bring them to just one hourly rate that's on the actual grade and step scale. Do I have any questions regarding the grade and step scale salary adjustments? Any questions about any of the positions or salary committee recommendations or the retiree COLA?
I do have a question on the 1% retiree COLA. Do the contributions right now by workers, is there a contribution in there that's factored in with the company that helps manage this, that's tied to a COLA or a prospective a COLA, or is this just off the base?
There is nothing in the policy that implements regular COLAs for retirees, so
And no
as,
contributions that they're making in order to be able to finance that from an actuarial perspective?
from an actuarial perspective, it does impact the amount that the county would be required to contribute on an annual basis. Several reasons why we included an increase in the budget of $3.6 million for retiree pension, or, I'm sorry, for pension contributions. $1 million of that is for the retiree COLA, which is 1% from last year, 1% for this year, because we're allowed to pay for that over a 3-year period. So as far as the employee contribution, they still continue to pay 6% of their salary each year as they're working, but once you're retired, you don't contribute into the plan anymore.
But while they're working, is it factored in that there will be a future COLA, because that creates an obligation if we're putting this in there and they didn't contribute to support a COLA?
The actuary that we contract with includes regular COLAs for current employees, which then increases the actuarial determined contribution, but it does not build in a regular COLA for retirees. So that would be an assumption we would need to change with our actuary.
Yep, yes, it would. Okay, thank you.
Isn't that something that we've been working on a policy, because we don't have it anywhere in policy, the frequency or what economic conditions might trigger a COLA increase for retirees? We just did it, I don't want to say at a whim, but not pegging it to anything, it's at a whim.
Yeah, and I think we have been talking about that, and that's a decision that this board will have to make at some point, whether, so we don't do that on a yearly basis, right? So and I think our actuary, I think they've been talking to us about, for budgetary purposes and thinking going forward, it makes some sense to come up with, some sort of policy so we can, have a better idea that what's gonna happen on a yearly basis. So, yeah, there were some years in the past where there were no COLAs for retirees. Then there was, I think, 1 or 2 years where they were like really high percentage to try to make up for so last year we did 1%, this year we're recommending 1%, but I agree. I think it's something that, I think we talked to our.
We did. We talked to our financial advisor last, and I believe in January. And in addition to policy recommendation, or policy changes that we'll recommend regarding implementation of regular COLAs for retirees, we'd also like to talk to the commission about changing the discount rate that we currently have as our expected yield for investment returns. As you know, last fiscal year, we lost $22 million on all of our plans combined. If we change our discount rate from 7.25% to 7%, will reduce the county's reliance on those market investment returns and will help smooth some of that market volatility that we're currently experiencing. What it will mean, though, is that the county's required contribution will increase, which is part of the reason why I included a $2 million increase for pension contributions, not just to increase our percentage of funding status, but to help reduce our reliance on those market returns and help reduce that volatility that we're currently experiencing.
And Michelle, I think when you look at this, you don't look at anything in isolation. You have to look at overall the entirety of the compensation package from when they're working and right on through into retirement. And when I compare the retirement package here, just one data point observation, 2% for each year for your retirement is twice as much as you get in the federal government, where you get 1% a year towards your retirement. So if you work 30 years, you get 30% of your base salary. Here, if you work 30 years, it's times 2, it's 60% of your base salary, which is a very generous program. And although the federal employees do get a COLA tied to the CPI, they don't have that jump start of that 2%, which is twice as much. And it's a very, very, very generous program.
Correct. Do I have any other questions?
Hearing none.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, next is Reinhart Rural Legacy Program, Easement. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Commissioners. Today I bring you the Reinhart Rural Legacy Easement Project proposal. As in other proposals, just go over the history of the program real quick. It's been in place, the Rural Legacy Program in Washington County has been in place since 1998. Settled our first easement in 2000. Since then, we have preserved over 8,600 acres with the program. It's all state money, which includes easement value for property, also 3% administrative input from the state, as well as a 1.5% contribution for compliance purposes. And then also the state will compensate us per project for all incidental costs such as title work, surveys, and things of that nature. The Reinhart property is located at 17218 Shepherdstown Pike in Sharpsburg. And this is a property that has a significant agricultural, scenic, environmental, and historic attributes. It contains both ag and woodland areas, a historic house, and it lies obviously off of Shepherdstown Pike in a part of the county that's heavily trafficked during Civil War. It's also contiguous to several properties that are on the Maryland Inventory of Historic Places. The property itself borders the Potomac River and the C&O Canal, and on its northwestern boundary. And there's also a federal scenic easement on the property. It's about 6 acres on that northern border there along the canal. This parcel will add to a block of thousands of acres of contiguous preserved land around Antietam Battlefield, and we will be extinguishing 12 development rights with this easement, as it's 2 parcels on there. So the recommendation is to approve the estate of James Reinhart Rural Legacy Easement Project in the amount of $1 million for 267.138 easement acres paid for 100% by the state of Maryland.
Motion to approve, as stated.
Okay, any questions, comments? Motion and second on the floor to approve as submitted. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you,
Thank you
Chris.
very much.
Okay, next is Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services FY24 Community Partnership Agreement Proposal. Good morning.
Good morning. Rachel Souter, Senior Grant Manager, Office of Grant Management.
Morning, Nicole Phillips, Grant Manager, Office of Grant Management.
The Washington County Office of Grant Management, and on behalf of and at the direction of the Local Management Board, requests approval to submit a Community Partnership Agreement proposal to the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services for fiscal year 2024 in response to their notice of funding availability. The proposal requests funding for 6 programs impacting the well-being of children, youth, and families in Washington County, as well as support for county administrative expenses. The total funding available for our county is $810,266, and it will be allocated to the following programmatic strategies and their respective vendors. Family-centered support services by the Department of Social Services is $88,800. School-based mental health services by Brook Lane is $285,060. The disconnected youth program enhancements done by the Western Maryland Consortium are $50,687. The Family Strong program by Potomac Case Management Services, $90,000. The local care team coordinator role, which the vendor is to be determined currently, $54,000. The juvenile diversion program by Potomac Case Management Services, $120,319, and Office of Grant Management administrative expenses is $121,400.
And we get paid to do it.
And we're required to do it.
So in looking at these allocations, Rachel, are these cross-leveled with what the community organization is doing? And Are they aware of what these proposals are? Because if you're giving something to, say, Brooks House, and Brooks House is also getting money from our community organization fund, or are these two specifically different programs for Brooks? Okay.
Are you referring to the Brook Lane Health Services?
Oh, Brook Lane Health Services, I'm sorry.
So most of these programs, or these vendors, I'm not sure if any of them get
Any community
COF
organization?
funding.
Okay. Just checking.
Off the top of my head, I'm thinking that they don't, so they are separate.
Okay, good, thank you.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion and second on the floor to approve as submitted. All in favor by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same side. Okay, thank you. Next item is FY '24 Performance Incentive Grant. Approval to submit application and accept funding as awarded.
Rachel Souter, Senior Grant Manager, Office of Grant Management. The Washington County Sheriff's Office Day Reporting Center is requesting approval to submit an application to the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services for performance incentive grant funding in the amount of $173,501 and to accept the funding as awarded. The Day Reporting Center intends to use this funding in the Parenting, Behavioral Health, and Monitoring Services Program, which serves individuals sentenced to the Day Reporting Center through appropriate diversion, deflection, service provision, and recidivism reduction resources. The Office of Grant Management has reviewed the application and program guidelines. The funding period is for 1 year, starting July 1st, 23, and ending June 30th, 24. There is no match requirement associated with the agreement.
Motion to approve.
I second.
Motion is second on the floor to submit, or to approve as submitted. All in favor by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next item, Maryland 911 Board approval to submit application and accept awarded funding. Kevin Lewis. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
And Nicole Phillips.
Good morning, Nicole Phillips, Grant Manager, Office of Grant Management.
Well, would you like this?
Sure, absolutely.
Go ahead.
We are here for a motion to approve the submission of the grant application to the Maryland 911 Board in the amount of $286,876.69 and to accept funding as awarded for the Motorola Solutions Dual Network Connection installation. Washington County Emergency Services is requesting this funding to establish a dual network connection to each of the primary safety answering points and call handling systems, as well as the alternate systems locations through Motorola Solutions. This project will add another layer of redundancy to the call routing system and eliminate any single points of failure. Identical services are also being initiated across the state of Maryland.
So, as the project is basically part of the Maryland's Next Generation 911, with the next generation of 911 and bringing different platforms of 911 call beyond the traditional phone service, such as video, voice, recording, different things, paging and so forth. What they're doing across the state and through Motorola Solutions, as she stated, is creating these dual networks to the Easement, or the Emergency Services IP network throughout the state. So it brings the two dual circuits into our center as you have dual connections and backup.
Is this the latest and greatest? Is we're going to be okay for a year or two or 6 months or whatever?
Sure, at
Yeah.
least for now, as part of the state.
Yeah.
So the numbers board provides the funding, contracts established with Motorola, concurrences through Director Curry with purchasing and so forth. We're just basically coming before you all so we can make presentation to the numbers board at the end of the month.
Kevin, about maybe 2 years ago, I was at a Wintermako conference, and there was a presentation of the video 911, and we were actually watching. They were able to do take 911 calls at the convention center, real 911 calls. They were actively. That was amazing. But how many years off are we until we have? Maybe it's not years. How far off are we until we have that in Washington County?
So I think you'll see, again, I'm not sure the exact timeline or distribution as they're creating the services now. As you can see with Motorola, FirstNet, and the different things, the platforms are more or less there, being connected. I always say it's like, I'll probably never see it before my retirement, but I'm not sure anymore that, within the next 2 years, I think you'll start seeing some of the program changes and stuff as the connectivity's created.
Motion to approve. You need a motion for this? Yeah, you need a
Yes, I
motion.
do.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second to approve as submitted. All in favor by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Next item is contract award, PUR 1481, task order 15, Washington County Agricultural Education Center indoor multipurpose building and event parking. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Rick Curry, Director of Purchasing.
Andy Rashelman, Director of Public Works.
Subject before you is contract award, PUR 1481, task order 15, for the Washington County Agricultural Education Center indoor multipurpose building and event parking. Recommendation to award the contract for the Agricultural Education Center indoor multipurpose building and event parking project to the lowest responsive bidder, L.S. Grimm Consulting Engineers, LLC of Hagerstown, Maryland, who submitted a total lump sum amount of $991,954 for task 1 and task 2. As you can see, the work being performed is to build a new multi-purpose building capable of hosting special events, recreation, even could be used for a staging area for emergency responses. The request to design service was listed under 5 consultants team under the county's contract PUR 1481. Facility design, 5 bids were submitted as indicated on the tabulation matrix. We have the tabulation is showing the bidders who submitted their pricing. Also, we have concurrence from the Agriculture Advisory Board, and there are funds budgeted for this project. I will turn over to Andrew for the discussion portion of this.
Sure, thank you. I'll add as well, if you're looking at your bid matrix, the apparent low bidder was deemed non-responsive due to a calculation error and withdrew their bid. So that's the reason why they're not the recommended award. The Ag Center hosts over 55 facility rentals per year, totaling an estimated 90,000 attendees. However, indoor space is at a premium, and we currently have 1 indoor non-sprinkler building, and that's limited to a 300-person common area gathering capacity. So this facility will allow for year-round use as well as a zoned rental facility system that will more fully utilize the center. We also have substantial demand for community recreational facilities and a shortage of these amenities in southern Washington County. As mentioned, we're anticipating the building can be used for emergency response staging and storage facility. We saw the potential need for that during the COVID-19 crisis and trying to find those spaces. The project is broken down into a task 1 and a task 2. Task 1 is to evaluate the site's water and sewer capacity. Because we are looking at providing on-site water and sewer, that's the first order of business to ensure that what we're proposing can be accommodated. Task 2 is all the remaining work. The project does assume state funding and therefore will be designed to LEED Silver standards. That's leadership in energy environmental design. As part of the LEED design and buildings systems process, we will be looking to bring on board a third-party representative for commissioning services. That's for the building facility systems. And so that will be in addition to these services. And as Rick mentioned, there are funds budgeted in the capital improvement plan account, and we're looking at a 690 consecutive day calendar period for the contract.
Andrew, this is the one that we can use this for livestock, or does the floor, is the floor removable in this one?
So that'll be part of the design. What we told them so far is, again, a lot of flexible space. So we would anticipate some sort of rubberized surface for the common area and trying to keep things similar to the ag theme and maybe just a polished concrete floor, other areas to keep costs down.
Could you put livestock in it?
Yes, you could. I think that's part of what we'll work out is some of the other things, just to make sure if we have common uses, that what those uses are then can accommodate whatever is coming, after them.
Andrew, you mentioned the project assumes state funding. How much is that state funding? What amount are you requesting? And what happens if the state funding doesn't come through?
So there'd be several funding sources. So we have about $4.5 million in prior funds currently that would be not including state funding. This year, in this current fiscal year, we would be requesting program open space funds. So those are state funds that will come before this board. And there'd probably be several years we'd look to apply those. Also, once we're further along in the design process, another state funding source is the Maryland Heritage Area Grant. I think this project could align well with that. And then another opportunity, just like the city has requested state bond funding for their project, we would potentially consider that option as well.
But remind me of the $4.5 million. You said we would have $4.5 million left over.
We have currently in our, what we call prior funds, meaning it's already available to us. So there were some funds set aside from ARPA. There were some general fund dollars. I think there were some surplus funds. And so all of those combined, as well as a program open space project for the event parking area. Because really this includes design for almost 2 projects. And we may bid them out that way. One is for the building and the other one is to take care of some facility-wide needs. Parking is one of those. We're looking things at a facility-wide level. And so not just that we're building a building here and then we have to address stormwater or forestation requirements and those kind of things. So really the design kind of captures all that. And so, yes, there was some money set aside in a project for, it's called Ag Center Development, if you look under the CIP account.
That was through COVID funding.
The COVID funding was for the building.
The ARPA relief.
There's already program open space funding that's for the Ag Center Development side, which is for the event parking and some of those facilities.
Yeah, I'm good. Motion to approve.
My second.
Okay, motion and second to approve as submitted. All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
I'll be a no, and just let me explain. I was opposed to using ARPA funding for this project. I don't think it's a horrible project. Let me be clear about that. But as it was presented to us then and as it is now, looking for staging services for an emergency, we didn't have an issue finding staging services. Hagerstown Community College was generous with us. They provided some space. We had a lot of empty retail space that was provided to us. I don't see where we had an issue finding space for emergency or for storage here. It's mentioned. When it talks about recreational activities, I know there's things done at the Ag Center that may not be done necessarily elsewhere, but you mentioned the city of Hagerstown and their project for an indoor multi-use center. I think we could cooperate maybe with Hagerstown for just the use of some space for projects that are time to time may need to go on. So I just don't think this was the best use of COVID relief funding. That's why I'll be a no.
I will say, when you look at the city's project and ours, there are, I would say, there's a fundamental difference. The city's is a recreational sports complex that they're looking at a private entity to run and operate. We are primarily an event center. And so a lot of the activities that we have there on the weekends are of that nature. And so while we can supplement that, that's our primary focus there, is kind of the utility function.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at when the list said recreational activities, so an indoor rec center. And I was just at an event 2 weeks ago, the gymnasium at Hagerstown Community College. You wouldn't think a gymnasium would host an event like that, but it was a wonderful venue. So I don't think that's the best use of that money, just my opinion. It's not a horrible project. I'll say that again.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Barr had to step out. Thank you. Next up, rejection of bid PUR 1601. Mr. Curry, introduce yourself in the matter.
Rick Curry, Director of Purchasing.
Mark Bradshaw, Director of Environmental Management.
Subject before you is rejection of bid PUR 1601 for one new 2022 or latest production model chassis cab with utility body. Move to take action to best interest of the county and to request a bid for the one vehicle be rejected. It's no longer available from the dealer. And also recommendation to advertise to solicit another replacement truck. The ARF talks about the mileage on the truck and whatnot. Basically, the truck was available 1 week prior to us bringing it in for an award. Because that truck has been sold, we are in the process of tracking down another vehicle.
I guess you want a motion to reject the bid and then a motion to bid. Is that two motions or one? A motion to be able to bid on another one, right? That'd be my
Also
motion if
rejection.
that's acceptable.
Okay. Is that a motion? That's a motion on the floor?
Motion, you're saying motion to reject and to do the other.
And to move forward with another bid.
All in one.
Yeah, that's a motion.
Everyone okay? Any questions? We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor by saying aye.
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 Opposed,
Thank you.
same sign?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, agricultural faces of farming. Leslie.
Good morning again. Leslie Hart, Washington County Department of Business Development. I have two guests with me today. I have Jill Hudson, the owner of the Market Hub, and I have Selena Wilkes, the owner of Elmwood Farm Bed and Breakfast. And they're going to see what I'm going to show you for the first time as well. So just a reminder, this is the Faces of Farming campaign. I roll out 2 videos every month featuring a large variety of agricultural entities that we have in Washington County. This is essential to our community, being as that agriculture represents almost half of our landscape in Washington County. And I like to bring you the faces of the farmers who bring you food, fiber, and fuel. We have over 900 operating farms in Washington County. I anticipate when the census rolls out, that number is going to top 1,000. And we have $153 million in market value of products sold, making agriculture the largest industry in Washington County. One of the things you had asked me about before is ways to reach our community, and I'll elaborate just very briefly that I'll be rolling out something to the elementary school children. The Faces of Farming campaign will roll into the schools. The children will have the opportunity to learn about it from the farmer, talk directly to the farmer, and then there will be some kind of coloring contest that will roll out at the Ag Expo. So you'll see a lot more of Faces of Farming coming. So today's Faces of Farming is Elmwood Farm Bed and Breakfast of Williamsport, featuring alpacas, and the Market Hub of Hagerstown, which is probably our newest indoor farmers market. So roll that beautiful Faces of Farming.
Elmwood Farm is a historic farm that's been totally restored. It was built in 1853, pre-Civil War, through a C&O Canal merchant out of Baltimore, a very wealthy person, but it was handed down in multiple generations. My sister Letty and I are farm, and farming over the years had changed, and we've been very blessed to hang on to this property and adapt to the changes in farming over the years and find a way to repurpose and make it profitable, but yet always be that make yourself at home feel for everybody. It had been sold, believe it or not, to a developer. We were very fortunate. Sometimes things are meant to be, and I was able to buy the property back. That is just right there amazing in itself. So we were able to retain that history, and we hope to do that for many years to come as a legacy. Reason why we chose alpacas to be our farm animal is, first of all, they're so unique and have their own personalities. And with us being a bed and breakfast here in Williamsport, there's a lot of horses and cows in the area, as well as goats and sheep. And we just thought the alpaca would bring in another element for our tourists, as well as our guests. Here, we really appreciate the quality of their fleece. It's hypoallergenic, very flexible, and it makes a wonderful product, which can be turned into wonderful gifts. It's a great animal as a pet and to have on a farm to complement our B&B and our venue, but at the same time, it's a great supplement to the farm as a whole from a business standpoint. In our generation right now, it's very important that we go back to our roots. there's a reason why things were done the way they were in the past. And I think innovation wonderful, because I'm that way myself, but there's a balance in that. And when you look at your health and living and quality of life, farming plays a big role in that. There's so many elements that if we get back to our local sources, we thrive as a community on a business standpoint, but then we thrive in a healthy lifestyle. And I think our country has gone in a direction, we have too many processed foods, so we just got to scale back. And I think what we're doing here in Washington County is phenomenal, how the local farms are coming together, interact with one another, support one another, and help. That's the awesome coalition. That's how you use the seed.
My name is Jill Hudson. We are at the Barn at the View originally, now the Market Hub. We're in North Hagerstown. We're on Pennsylvania Avenue, not far from the airport. So the Barn at the View was started 12 years ago to be a small events facility made in a barn that was 100 years old. COVID hit, that then shut us down for 15 months because of COVID. And in that process of those 15 months, I met a lot of these small businesses, then decided that we would all be considered essential if we all stuck together. So if we sell local and we sell all our different wares, we're essential and we never have to be shut down again. We have Painted Pastures, we have Linton's vegetables, we have De Parma's chicken, we have Stonewall Angus's beef, we have Waltz's pork. We also have Red Dragon's teas. We have lots of varieties. Honey is something that if you buy it local, it helps with your allergies of that region. If you buy local from the different farmers and the different vegetables and the breads and stuff like that who are using local products in which to make them, it's better for you physically because it's something natural that's coming from you. So the Market Hub's idea, the original thought is it's a wheel. So with that wheel, if you buy local, you're half of it. So you're supporting a farmer, but in turn, that farmer or that artisan is supporting the community. So that's what creates the wheel. I'm a firm believer, if there's no farms, there's no food. So I always go with that slogan. But I also believe if we don't support our local agriculture, we will end up regretting it in the long run because it all affects us in the circle of life.
Any questions? I hope you enjoy those. We try to keep them very short, very brief, and it's pretty informative. And they are all filmed spontaneous. There is no coaching. There is no script. It is done spur of the moment. Thank you very much. Thanks for moving me to this week. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Recess.
Yes, recess. No, we're going to the senior center.
Oh, we're going there?
Yes.
Okay. For some reason I wasn't here.
So it's perfect timing, right? We're right on schedule.
We picked it back up.